I was 7 months pregnant. I had just hauled 6 bags of groceries up 3 flights of stairs while my husband played video games. As I stood there, sweating and exhausted, he looked at me and said, "You're getting disgusting to look at." His friends heard him. He wanted them to. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled, kissed him, and quietly walked out. He had no idea I was about to dismantle his entire life while he was still waiting for me to put the groceries away. I'm writing this from the sterile anonymity of a hotel room, the faint scent of industrial cleaner a bizarre backdrop to the implosion of my life. I am 7 months pregnant, and just a few hours ago, the man I married, the man I was building a life and a family with, looked at me with a casual cruelty that has irrevocably shattered the carefully constructed reality I was living in. For 5 years, I was with Alan. We were married for 3 of those. Our story began in the charming, slightly dusty world of community theater. I was the quiet, behind-the-scenes girl, the one who could work magic with a needle and thread, bringing the costumes to life. He was the star, the charismatic leading man with the soul of a musician and a passion that seemed to ignite everything he touched. I was, in a word, smitten. I fell for the character he played on stage, never realizing that his entire life was a performance, and I was just an unwitting member of the cast. The first subtle shifts in our dynamic began when the 2 pink lines appeared on a pregnancy test. It was an unplanned pregnancy, a surprise that sent a shockwave through our comfortable, 2-person world. My initial shock quickly gave way to a quiet, burgeoning excitement. Alan, however, was less enthusiastic. He said all the right words, of course. He was an actor, after all. He spoke of his excitement, of his readiness for fatherhood, of his unwavering support for me. But his actions told a different story. His actions were a slow and steady retreat from our shared life, a withdrawal into the digital world of his video games, into late-night sessions with his band, into anything and everything that was not our impending parenthood. I, in my desperate desire to maintain the illusion of our perfect life, made excuses for him. He was just processing the change in his own way, I told myself. Men mature at a different pace. But the truth was, he was checking out, and I was being left to navigate the turbulent waters of my first pregnancy entirely alone. And it was a rough pregnancy. The first trimester was a blur of relentless nausea, of days spent with my head in the toilet bowl. Then came the anemia, a bone-deep exhaustion that left me feeling like a ghost in my own body. And now, in my 3rd trimester, a persistent, grinding back pain had become my constant companion. Which brings me to today. The day the curtain was finally, brutally, ripped away. I had just finished a long day at work, my body aching with the familiar strains of late-stage pregnancy. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store, a necessary but daunting task. Our apartment is a 3rd-floor walk-up, a charming pre-war building with no elevator, a feature that had never bothered me until I was carrying an extra 30 pounds of baby and a week's worth of groceries. When I pulled up to our building, I could already hear the telltale sounds of digital warfare echoing from our open window. I found Alan exactly where I knew I would, sprawled on the couch, headset on, his face illuminated by the flickering light of his massive television screen, a graveyard of empty energy drink cans littering the coffee table. He was deep in a game of Call of Duty, his attention so completely consumed that he barely registered my presence. I asked, my voice already strained with exhaustion, if he could possibly help me with the groceries. He waved a dismissive hand in my direction, his eyes never leaving the screen. "In a minute, babe," he mumbled. Middle of a really important match. So, I began the long, arduous journey. Up and down, 3 flights of stairs, my pregnant body protesting with every step. With each trip, the grocery bags seemed to grow heavier. My breath more ragged. By the time I hauled the 6th and final bag into our apartment, I was drenched in sweat. My back was a symphony of screaming nerve endings, and my ankles had swollen to twice their normal size. I set the last bags on the kitchen floor and collapsed into a chair, my body trembling with exhaustion, trying to catch my breath. And that's when it happened. Alan, in a rare moment of acknowledging my existence, swiveled his head in my direction. He looked me up and down, a look of pure, unadulterated disgust on his face. And then he said the words that will forever be burned into my memory. "Jesus," he said, his voice loud enough for his friends on the headset to hear. "You're getting disgusting to look at. You better lose that baby weight, and fast, or I'll find someone who actually takes care of herself." For a moment, my brain simply refused to process the information. It was as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Then I heard it, a ripple of laughter, tinny and distant, coming through his headphones. His friends, his audience. He had performed this act of casual cruelty for them. He wanted them to hear it. He wanted them to laugh. In that instant, something inside me shifted. The part of me that had been making excuses, the part that had been clinging to the illusion of the man I thought he was, that part of me died. A strange, cold calm washed over me. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not give him the dramatic reaction he was so clearly baiting me for. Instead, I stood up, walked over to the couch, leaned down, and kissed his forehead. "I'm going to go take a shower," I said, my voice eerily serene. The look of utter confusion on his face was a small, hollow victory. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, the moment the sound of the running water provided a shield for my private grief, I finally allowed myself to break. I slid down the tiled wall of the shower and sobbed, great, heaving, silent sobs that racked my entire body. But these were not just tears of sorrow. They were tears of rage. They were tears of a clarity so profound it was terrifying. Suddenly, every red flag, every dismissive comment, every broken promise from the past 5 years coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. This wasn't a new Alan. This was the real Alan. The charming, charismatic musician was the character. This cruel, callous man-child was the actor beneath the mask. And I was about to bring our child, our daughter, into this toxic world. A daughter who would grow up learning that this is what a relationship looks like. That this is what a man does to a woman he supposedly loves. She would either learn to emulate his cruelty or learn to accept it as her due. And the thought of that, the thought of my daughter ever feeling the way I felt in that moment, was a pain far greater than my own shattered heart.
No.
The word was a silent scream in my mind. Absolutely not. I emerged from the shower a different woman. I put on my most comfortable maternity dress, a soft, floral print that had always made me feel pretty. I walked back into the living room, a place that suddenly felt alien and hostile. "I need to get some air," I told Alan, my voice still unnervingly calm. "I just need some time to think." He grunted in response, his attention already back on the digital battlefield. I didn't say another word. I walked to the hall closet and grabbed my hospital go bag, which, in a moment of foresight that now seems like a divine intervention, I had packed last week. I grabbed my laptop, my purse with all my important documents, and I walked out the door of the apartment, out of the building, and out of the life I had so carefully and so mistakenly built. I am now in a hotel room 20 minutes away. I have called my sister and my rock, my voice of reason. She is driving here from an hour away and will be here in the morning. Alan has called twice. He has texted once. Not to ask if I am okay. Not to ask where I am. He texted to ask where I had put the leftover pasta from the night before. I am terrified. I am 7 months pregnant and effectively homeless. Our finances are a tangled mess, though I have always, thankfully, maintained a separate bank account for my own paychecks. But I was counting on him. I was counting on a partner. I was counting on the man I thought I had married. But that man, I now realize, never truly existed. He was a fiction. And as I sit here, in this sterile, impersonal room, with the life I am sworn to protect kicking gently inside me, I know with a certainty that is both terrifying and liberating that I am not going back. Not tonight. Not ever. The next 4 weeks were a masterclass in covert operations, a period of my life where I lived a double life with a single-minded focus that both exhausted and empowered me. After that first night of clarity in the hotel, my sister and arrived like a force of nature. We spent hours talking, crying, and, most importantly, planning. She agreed with the collective wisdom of the internet. I had to go back to the apartment, but only as a spy in my own home. I could not let Alan know I was planning to leave until every single one of my ducks was in a meticulously straight row. Returning to that apartment was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Alan, in his infinite self-absorption, greeted me with a sigh of relief, not because he was worried about me, but because his routine had been disrupted. When I finally, calmly, brought up his comment about my weight, he rolled his eyes with the practiced ease of a man who has perfected the art of dismissiveness. "Oh my God, are we still talking about that?" he groaned. "It was a joke. You're being way too sensitive." He then, with breathtaking audacity, attempted to flip the script. I had been so moody lately. He was walking on eggshells. And then, the line that almost made me abandon all my careful planning and just scream, "Do you have any idea how hard this pregnancy has been for me?" For him. I nearly choked on my own rage. But I saw the bigger picture. I saw the finish line. So I took a deep, steadying breath, forced a wobbly smile, and apologized for overreacting. I blamed it on hormones, on fatigue, on the general misery of being a human incubator. The relief that washed over his face was immediate and sickening. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully gaslit me back into my box. He had no idea that while he was celebrating his victory, I was already on the phone with the most ruthless divorce attorney I could find. Living with him during that month was a special kind of hell. I was an actress, playing the role of the apologetic, hormonal, but ultimately compliant pregnant wife. Every day was a performance. I smiled, I cooked, I listened to him complain about his bandmates or the injustices of the video game world. But every night, after he fell asleep, I would slip out of bed and work. I became a meticulous archivist of his cruelty. I started a digital journal, documenting every snide comment, every act of neglect, every broken promise, complete with dates, times, and verbatim quotes. I began to secretly record our conversations on my phone, capturing the verbal abuse in his own voice, a damning chorus of his contempt. My lawyer assured me that in our state, this was perfectly legal and would be invaluable. My finances became my primary focus. I had always been the main breadwinner, a fact he conveniently ignored, and my paycheck had always been deposited into my personal account. I quietly opened a new account at a completely different bank and rerouted my direct deposit. Then, I began the slow, methodical process of siphoning funds from our joint account into my new, secret one. Small amounts, $100 here, $200 there, disguised as grocery runs or baby supply purchases. It wasn't theft. It was reclamation. It was me taking back the money I had poured into our life while he was pouring his into his hobbies. It was during this deep dive into our finances that I made a discovery that turned my stomach. He had a credit card. In my name. A card I had no knowledge of. He had opened it a year ago and had racked up over $5,000 in debt. The charges were a map of his selfish priorities: a top-of-the-line gaming PC, a new sound system for his band, endless microtransactions for his online games. I immediately reported the fraud, providing the credit card company with a mountain of evidence that I had not been the one making these purchases. While he slept, I gathered our life on paper. Birth certificates, our marriage license, years of bank statements and tax returns. All of it was scanned, digitized, and moved to a secure cloud server. The physical copies smuggled out to my sister's house in my work bag. And had also found me a new home, a small, ground-floor, two-bedroom apartment.
No stairs.
An in-unit laundry. A secure building. I signed the lease using my burner phone, another new and necessary tool in my escape plan. My new apartment became my secret project, my hope chest. Piece by piece, I began to move my life, smuggling out cherished possessions, sentimental items, and essential baby gear whenever he was out of the house. His behavior, in the meantime, only worsened. Believing he had successfully quelled my minor rebellion, he let his mask of the charming, supportive husband slip even further. One evening, he invited his gaming friends over without any warning. I had just gotten home from work, my back in spasms, and had collapsed onto the bed. He actually came into the bedroom, not to check on me, but to tell me to make myself useful and order them some pizzas. When I told him I was in too much pain to get up, he let out a dramatic, long-suffering sigh. "Being pregnant isn't a disability," he scoffed. "Women have been doing this for centuries. My own mother worked right up until the day before I was born." A blatant lie, as I would later confirm with his mother, who had been on mandatory bed rest for the last month of her pregnancy. I ordered and paid for the pizzas from my bed. When they arrived, he yelled from the living room for me to get the door, as they were in the middle of a match. I had to drag my swollen, aching body past a couch full of his friends, who pointedly ignored me, and play hostess. After they finally left in the early hours of the morning, leaving a disaster of beer cans and pizza boxes in their wake, he followed me to bed and tried to initiate sex. When I, exhausted and in pain, turned him down, he had the audacity to say, "Come on, it's not like you have to do anything. Just lie there like you usually do." I spent the next half hour crying silently in the bathroom, my hand on my belly, reminding myself that it was almost over. My escape was planned for the following weekend. Alan was going to his parents' house for his father's birthday, an overnight trip that would give me a precious 24-hour window. My sister, two of my closest friends, and, in an astonishing turn of events, Alan's own younger brother, Rory, were all on board to help. Rory had witnessed one of Alan's tirades a few weeks prior and had secretly reached out to me, ashamed of his brother's behavior and offering his unconditional support. The days leading up to the move were a blur of adrenaline and anxiety. But with every box I secretly packed, with every logistical detail I finalized, I felt a piece of myself, a piece I thought I had lost forever, slowly coming back to life. The morning of Operation Exodus was gray and overcast, a perfect reflection of the storm that was about to break in Alan's life. He was in an unusually cheerful mood, humming to himself as he packed his overnight bag, clearly thrilled at the prospect of a weekend away from his disgusting and moody pregnant wife. He gave me a perfunctory kiss goodbye, a casual, don't do anything crazy while I'm gone, and walked out the door, completely oblivious to the fact that he was walking out of our life forever. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, my team sprang into action. And arrived first, her SUV, a chariot of liberation. My friend Mia followed in a small moving truck she had borrowed. And then came Rory, Alan's own brother, his face a mixture of nervousness and righteous determination. We had 32 hours. Looking around the apartment that had been my home and my prison for 5 years was a deeply surreal experience. Every object held a memory, some beautiful, some tainted by the slow poison of his neglect. But there was no time for sentimentality. We worked with a focused, almost military precision, following the detailed inventory list I had spent weeks creating. Rory, a gentle giant, insisted on doing all the heavy lifting, waving away my protests. "He's my brother," he said, his voice heavy with a shame that was not his to bear. "But what he's done to you, it's not right. We weren't raised this way." The most cathartic moment of the day came when we disconnected his prized gaming PC, the very monument to his selfishness that he had purchased by committing fraud in my name. I carefully packed the expensive components into their original boxes, a strange and satisfying reversal of the care I had once put into our life together. By evening, my side of the apartment was a hollowed-out shell. We ordered pizza, a celebratory feast this time, and ate it on the floor of my new, empty apartment, our laughter echoing in the high-ceilinged rooms, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. The next morning, we returned for the final phase. I cleaned the old apartment from top to bottom, not for him, but for myself, a symbolic cleansing of the toxicity that had permeated those walls. And then, I prepared my final statement. On the now-empty kitchen counter, I left a small, curated collection of items, a copy of the divorce papers, a folder containing the meticulously documented evidence of his financial fraud and verbal abuse, and a single, handwritten note. It said, "You told me to find someone better."
I did.
I chose my daughter. I chose myself. Once I was safely in my new home, the final pieces of my old life moved and my support system departed. I made the call. He didn't answer. I left a calm, concise voicemail informing him that I had left, that he would find an explanation on the kitchen counter, and that he was not to contact me or my family. I sent a follow-up text, then blocked his number on every conceivable platform. My last act of self-preservation was to email his parents, laying out a brief, factual account of what had happened, a preemptive strike against the inevitable narrative he would spin in which he was the victim. Within an hour, the fallout began. A barrage of calls from unknown numbers, a frantic, desperate attempt to breach the walls I had so carefully constructed. His mother, to her credit, called my sister. She was sobbing, apologizing for her son's behavior, a moment of unexpected grace in the midst of the chaos. Rory kept me updated via text. Alan had returned home early, had found the empty apartment, and had, in Rory's words, gone absolutely ballistic. He had spent hours cycling through a predictable cocktail of rage, confusion, and a sudden, desperate desire to fix things. In a surprising and validating twist, several of Alan's own friends reached out to me, offering their support. It turned out that his cruelty had not gone unnoticed, it had simply gone unchallenged. I am now sitting in my new apartment, surrounded by the comforting chaos of unpacked boxes. It is small, but it is bright, and it is safe. My baby is due in 3 weeks. The terror of doing this alone is real, but it is eclipsed by the profound, overwhelming relief of being free. The divorce will be ugly.
I know that.
But for the first time in a very long time, I am not afraid. I am hopeful. The 10 months since I first sat in that lonely hotel room have been a whirlwind of transformation, a period of profound endings and beautiful, terrifying beginnings. First and most importantly, there's Lily. My daughter is now 6 months old, a perfect, gurgling, laughing little human who has completely reoriented my universe. She is the living, breathing embodiment of every difficult choice I made, the beautiful, undeniable proof that I was right to burn my old life to the ground. She was born 3 weeks early, just 5 days after I moved into my new apartment, as if she knew, on some instinctual level, that we were finally safe. My sister and was my rock during a 19-hour labor, holding my hand, breathing with me, and celebrating with me when Lily finally arrived, screaming her way into the world. The moment they placed her on my chest, a wave of love so fierce and primal washed over me that it erased every last lingering doubt. I did not call Alan. My lawyer had advised against it, and I knew that his chaotic, selfish energy was the last thing I needed in that sacred space. I informed him of his daughter's birth via a formal email the next day, a sterile announcement of her arrival. His response was a predictable torrent of narcissistic rage, a tantrum about his rights and my cruelty. My lawyer handled it all. Now for the pettiest and perhaps most satisfying part of this entire saga. Remember the man who called me disgusting for gaining the weight that was sustaining his own child? During the divorce proceedings, my lawyer unearthed a secret bank account where Alan had been stashing money. It was marital property, and a significant portion of it was awarded to me. Instead of being entirely responsible, I took a small piece of that settlement and booked a trip. I took my sister and my 3-month-old daughter to a beachfront resort in Florida. On our third day, as Lily napped peacefully by the pool, I put on a bikini for the first time since before my pregnancy. My body was different, softer, marked by the beautiful battle scars of motherhood, but I felt powerful. I asked Anne to take a photo of me, smiling, confident, looking out at the endless ocean. I sent that photo to Alan with a single caption, "Losing the weight. Don't worry." Then I blocked his number again. According to his brother, he was apoplectic. It was a small, silly act of defiance, but it was mine. It was me, reclaiming my body, my confidence, and a little piece of his ill-gotten money. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. I have primary custody. He has supervised visitation, for hours every other weekend. He has seen his daughter twice. Both times, he was late, disinterested, and more focused on taking selfies for his devoted dad Instagram narrative than on actually connecting with his child. He has since canceled every other scheduled visit. I document each cancellation, not with anger, but with a quiet sense of relief. As for me, I am healing. I am 15 pounds heavier than I was before I met Alan, and I have never felt more beautiful. I am financially stable. My business is growing, and my life is filled with the simple, profound joy of my daughter's laughter. Alan, from what I hear, is still playing the victim, spinning a tale of a crazy, postpartum wife who stole his child. But I am no longer a character in his story. I am the author of my own. And for the first time in a very long time, I can't wait to see what happens in the next chapter.